tensions between India and Pakistan were spiraling into a full-blown conflict, the US President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire in a post on Truth Social. This was about 5 p.m. IST on Saturday. Trump was quick to take credit without even informing the Indian government about his decision to publicize the announcement. Ideally, the news should have come from either parties, that is New Delhi and Islamabad. But aren't we all well aware of Trump's constant need for validation on conflict mediation? Even more so after the Russia-Ukraine conflict has failed to reach any meaningful conclusion. This despite Trump's efforts, which by the way also include his colossal showdown with the Ukrainian president at the White House. But let's fast forward to the evening of May 10. Barely hours after its announcement, the ceasefire was violated by Pakistan. No surprises there. And India responded too. But after that violation, an uneasy calm has prevailed at the border. Indian forces have already announced that the understanding is not the end of Operation Sindoor, bringing us to two critical questions. Will this ceasefire even hold, and can Donald Trump alone take credit for this understanding? According to a CNN report, senior US Trump administration officials were critical in working out the Saturday ceasefire. It says that on Friday morning, US officials received an alarming intelligence. Washington has not disclosed the nature of this alarming intelligence because of its sensitive nature. But it was instrumental enough to prompt urgent action from the top US leadership, including J.D. Vance, Interim National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. During the phone call, Vance conveyed to Prime Minister Modi concerns about a high probability of a dramatic escalation over the weekend. Nobody knows what they meant by this dramatic escalation, but it was certainly something serious. Don't forget, for J.D. Vance, it was a dramatic U-turn from his earlier statement that the US is not going to get involved in a war that's none of their business. But remember, the US Vice President was on an official family visit to India at the time of the Pahalgam carnage. And perhaps that came in clutch for the US intervention. According to CNN, Rubio and other State Department officials also called their counterparts in New Delhi and Islamabad. However, the Trump administration was not part of negotiations. Their role was limited to facilitating dialogue between the two rivals. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has thanked Trump for his leadership and proactive role. He also thanked Saudi Arabia and China for backing the peace efforts. Perhaps Pakistan needed it more than India. And that explains why India has not mentioned any foreign involvement. In fact, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said that the ceasefire was agreed upon directly between the two nations. That between the Directors General of Military Operations of India and Pakistan. No third-party mediation there, please note. And most importantly, it was the Pak DGMO that called his Indian counterpart an indication of how our armed forces have brought Pakistan to its knees.
Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours.
Now, India's comment also counters US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's statement. Remember, Rubio had rather brashly announced that India and Pakistan have agreed to start talks on a quote-unquote broad set of issues at a neutral site, begging the questions. What makes the Trump administration assume that India wants a third-party mediation on Kashmir when we have declared that it's A, a bilateral matter, B, terror and talks don't go hand in hand? Perhaps the White House ought to remember that Operation Sindoor has been launched to destroy Pak-sponsored terrorism and not question the territorial integrity of India's Kashmir. After all, it's the strategic edge that India has already achieved through its precision strikes on May 7 and 10 that have made Pak's Army General Asim Munir jump out of his skin. Also, considering that Trump announced the ceasefire decision even before any official confirmation from New Delhi or Islamabad, skeptics have doubted the sincerity of the US president's efforts and his knowledge of terrorism plaguing the valley. Don't forget, it was Trump who recently claimed that India and Pakistan have fought over Kashmir for 1500 years. That only highlights the US president's ignorance. So while the US president may want to flaunt his peace efforts, especially to Ukraine and NATO, and have Americans claim that it was their effective diplomacy that saved the day, bringing us back from the brink, the moot question remains, will the ceasefire hold and for how long? Because in the wake of the Pahalgam massacre, both India and Pakistan have announced a host of other reprisals. That includes suspending visas, banning trade, and most importantly, India's suspension of the Indus Water Treaty. Of course, there's no clarity whether such moves will be reversed. Makes one ask the Americans if they have answers to what is the future of those Kashmiris trapped between tourism and terrorism.